Okay, good afternoon, everybody. Today we continue with our discussion of life after death and the immortality of the soul, and looking at using our reason to look around us, the various things that we can see that point to the immortality of the soul. And today we're going to look at our abilities to think and will. Two abilities that all humans possess. And these two abilities are other pointers to the fact that the soul is immortal. Why is that? Well, first of all, we need to define our terms. What do I mean, you're asking, by thinking? Well, we're going to look at a very simple example to illustrate what thinking really is, to say what really is thinking about. What do we do? So what I want you to do is to go back to the time in your maths class when you were at school, primary school, studying geometry. And I want you to remember how you were presented with the shape of the triangle and the shape of the square, and how you learned to distinguish between a triangle and a square by saying to yourself, the triangle has 3 sides and the square has 4. And you did that in 2 ways. You distinguish them first by understanding, as I've said, that one has 3 sides and the other has 4. But secondly, you could also close your eyes to reinforce your understanding. You could close your eyes and imagine those 2 shapes in your mind as pictures, using your imagination, and comparing them. So that you really could understand that, yes, a triangle is very different from a square, one having 3 sides, one having 4. You could compare them. Now, what I want you to do is to compare 2 far more complicated geometric shapes. And we're going to increase the size of the geometric shape 100-fold, so that one has 103 sides and the other has 104 sides, just one more side than the other one. Now ask yourself, close your eyes, can you imagine in your mind those complex shapes accurately in the way that you could accurately imagine the simple triangle and the simple square? Can you do that when you close your eyes? No, it's impossible to do that. You can't imagine it. But, and this is the key to the example of distinguishing understanding from imagination, you can and I can still understand, and that's the point, understand the difference between them, even though we cannot imagine the shapes, pictures in our heads accurately. We might have a vague notion of a big geometric shape with lots of sides, but we couldn't distinguish 103 and 104. It's impossible to do that. But we can understand in our minds the difference between the 2 shapes. One has one side extra than the other. Now, by going through this example, we've learned that we can distinguish that pure understanding, our ability to understand, is far greater than our imagination. And it is not dependent on our imagination, because we can understand the difference between a 103-sided geometric shape from a 104-sided geometric shape. But we can't imagine those 2 shapes. Therefore, understanding is a far greater capacity, which is, it's clear that when we use our understanding, we're using a capacity that surpasses the brain, which is part of my body. And therefore, it points to my soul working in ways that are not dependent on my body. Understanding is greater than that. This example has proved that. So that's the first ability that we're talking about, that points to our immortality, because it's independent of our brain. Understanding is it independent, as this example has shown. I'm going to go on to the second ability that points to our immortality, is our ability to will things. What do I mean by willing? Many people would argue that willing, my ability to will things, is just a matter of following my instincts. Oh, I'm going to go shopping today. I will to go shopping because I need food to satisfy my instinct of hunger. But let's think about that. Is that really true? If willing is merely following my natural instinct, how could we say we can make real choices between options that are presented to us and take responsibility for the consequences of those choices? Praise for doing good and blame for doing bad would be simply playing with words. And being responsible for our actions would be an illusion. And if we take this to a present day, literally within the last week, to its logical conclusion, the police officer who was convicted this week of raping, torturing, and killing a young woman, he could not be held responsible for his actions because he could say, I was simply following my instincts. If willing, our ability to will, is simply instinct. And from that follows the fact that justice would be an illusion, wouldn't exist, if we are completely controlled by our instincts, and willing is just following our instincts. Now, given good reasons for saying that willing is a real aspect of our being human, but how do we know that willing is more than instinct? How can we really convince the person who thinks that willing is instinct that it's more than instinct? Can we only do that by appealing to our human need to see justice done? We want that police officer to be convicted and go to prison because he's done a horrific crime. Can we only point to that, or can we only point to the way that we praise good things and good events and good people, and we blame bad people and bad events when they happen, and we don't want them to happen? Well, we can also say this. Think on this. I want you to imagine a man driving his car beside a lake, and he sees a man struggling in the water. And in his mind are presented two options. He can either follow his strongest instinct, which he possesses, which is survival. And he can decide to pass by on the other side. As you remember in the parable of the Good Samaritan, the Levite and the priest pass by on the other side. Or the man in the car can follow his much weaker instinct of compassion. rather than his stronger, much stronger instinct to fear and self-preservation. Now, he jumps out of his car and he goes into the water and he rescues the man. Why does he do it? That he decides to be compassionate, that attempt and does save the drowning man, is proof that our will exists over and above our instincts, and can and does override our strongest instinct of self-preservation, and forces us to follow our much weaker instinct of compassion to go to the aid of the drowning man, as the Good Samaritan did in the parable to help the robbed man left for dead. That's a very good argument that can convince anybody that the will is a spiritual and non-material aspect of our personality, which points to the fact that our soul is immortal. So to conclude, our two abilities, first, to understand things, transcends our imagination. And our will is our other ability, which transcends our instincts. Both of these point to our soul being immortal. God bless you all, and see you on Friday. Bye for now.
Thank you, Father.